I think maybe a little bit surprised to get it. He only had 5 touches in the game. His third one was that spectacular equaliser. But did we see in that little moment just how important he is as a player to Crystal Palace?
I think you get the sense he's a good character around the dressing room as well. I mean, it shocked him getting the player of the match. It really did. But look, when you create a goal like that, and what he's done off the back of the performance, with the national team, it's been an incredible turnaround. It really has. But yeah, he's got this stature about him. They play so differently. They just play to their comfort when he's up front. Very different to Eddie Nketiah, but the goal itself was absolutely incredible. And I love the fact he said he was watching the game, because sometimes as a substitution, don't get me wrong, I've been there at times when you could be a bit upset if you're not starting, but look, he understands the process. He understands it's not about tonight. Mm-hmm. And he's always monitoring the game. And I think it's really important to actually that created that goal because he was focused on the bench, not on the pitch as well.
That was an intriguing little insight, wasn't it, Jamie? Because we were all of us asking where was David Raya in that moment. He had a really strong idea because he'd been observing from the sidelines.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight his position here, the goalkeeper. Now, we're going to see this more and more in terms of goalkeepers almost becoming, not just being good on the ball, but if you look at him, he's part of the back four there, because I think that Kiwior there is almost gone to left back. Lewis Skelly moves on. So this is almost trying to sort of get your extra man, if you like, in the build-up. And I think that's fine. There's no real pressure on the ball. He can handle the ball, David Raya. That, for me, is fine. But that is where he sees him. He sees him now. He knows he's not in the goal. So where I do have a problem with David Raya is eventually when there's players around the ball. So still now, he's in that centre-back position. But as soon as Odegaard almost takes up that position there as another centre-back, and then Kiwior becomes your left-back, I think you've just got to get back in goal.
Do you think it's because he's got so much confidence in Odegaard as a footballer?
Yeah, of course it is. And maybe it's this thing, we're winning 2-1. It had a little bit of a feel of it second half, maybe at Arsenal. Not so much he's thinking about other things, but it's just a little bit more lax than what it maybe would have been. But I think as soon as Saliba's got another player there to play with, the goalkeeper doesn't need to be there.
He's certainly not thinking worst-case scenario at this point,
he's not. But that is where Mateta's seen him. And then it's just a mess from Saliba. And it's happened a couple of times now. He was brilliant in the Bernabeu, and again, lost his concentration, his focus. But then this is fantastic. And you see the goalkeeper trying to get back. And that is absolutely
I'm fascinated by the finish, Theo, that he doesn't seem to look up, and he just, at the first possible opportunity, seems to get his shot away.
Well, as a forward, like you say, you always know and recognise spaces, and you recognise where the keeper is. He alluded that to the interview, but I mean, it's one of those where he doesn't think about it. And I think the best football, a lot of footballers these days, they tend to not think about what they're doing. It just happens in moments. And what I find interesting as well is I'm not a big fan of having a number 10. I know Odegaard's a very important player for Arsenal. At that point in the game, I think he was out of the game completely and wanted to get involved. And I think that was one thing. But also going back to Raya as well, he was a few instances that may be playing on his mind going into obviously to midweek next week. But yeah, look, fantastic Mateta. This goal, I thought Eze's was very good, but this is very special tonight.
The old cliche about being, for a big man, his touch isn't bad.
And he's a really good player. Yeah, I do.
How good, Jamie? I mean,
I think that there will be other clubs. Listen, I don't like saying that because Crystal Palace, supporters understand we get upset by that, but that's a brilliant finish, and for a couple of seasons now, he's been not just a real handful, he's been a real goal-getter for Crystal Palace. And you look at him, you're thinking, OK, can he go to that sort of next level of, maybe not teams challenging for the league, but teams who are challenging for the Champions League positions. You think of sort of the teams in and around, and that's really competitive, those type of teams. You'd say Crystal Palace are a level below that, almost your typical mid-table team, really. But I think he's brilliant. I really like him. He's a really good player. Just a little point you mentioned there, Theo. I hadn't really noticed it so much, with it being Odegaard being back in that position. I knew it was him, but we were speaking through the game, weren't we? And it's something I've sort of looked at a lot with Odegaard this last season. I feel like a lot of the time, he's not in the positions he should be, which is between the lines. I think for not so much this season. I think he's had an average season, but before that, I was looking around thinking he was almost on the level of Kevin De Bruyne, it felt to me, where he'd get the ball between the lines, he was threading things, everything was going through him. Felt like I was watching one of the best players in the Premier League. And we've done this, featured this heavily, I think, on Monday Night Football 2 or 3 times this season. He's always coming out the danger area. He's always coming into a central midfield position, an easy position for me, where he can make nice passes, look neat and tidy, but he's not actually hurting
if you're
anybody.
the opposition team, is that where you would want him, is actually amongst his back four rather than hurting you at the top of the pitch?
Of course, but I mean, he doesn't normally go that deep, and I don't want to be too critical, because I've just seen that clip. There might be a reason why he was there that I'm not aware of, but in general, even when I'm watching them tonight, and we've watched them all season, I feel like he's always on the outside of the game looking in, when he should be in there, maybe getting less touches, but actually in a position where he can get on the half-turn, he can play people through. I mean, you mentioned his goal return as well early on as well.
2 this season.
Yeah, for a player in this position, and as well, there's a lot of competition, you know, amongst the Premier League with the best talent, the number 10s. You would want more goals from him. You would. I get that, and I understand the point of he's that player that connects everyone, but he's got a player, Ethan Ranieri, behind him who will push him at some point. And you spoke earlier about saying that a player will only so long stay on the bench. Ethan has probably sped up his process of challenging. And this is the point for me at the start of the season when Odegaard was injured. Ethan didn't play as much at all, but I'm getting a sense now that he's pushing him. And I think Martin Odegaard at some point will realise this, and he can't just rely on being the team captain as well. But look, I just think it's one of those where it was a disappointing performance, and we spoke about performance going into a big game next week. Mikel Arteta will be pulling his hair out of that one tonight.
But I think the point you make there about, I was surprised Ranieri didn't play. You know, Sterling played, he found it tough, he has done. But we were speaking off air, what you've just mentioned in terms of, sometimes the only problem Arsenal have got with Ranieri is he plays in the same position as the best player, which is Saka. And eventually you've got to find us, one of them's got to be the number 10, probably eventually. And I think for another 12 months, they can move that around, mix it around, give Ethan a few more games, a bit more game time, but eventually it's going to be like, I want to play. And I do think one of them is going to end up being that Odegaard position in the next sort of 18 months.
Well, that Mateta goal made it 2-2, and there was still time for some nervy moments for the Arsenal crowd and some exciting moments if you're watching this on Merseyside tonight, because remember, another goal at this stage was going to hand Liverpool the title. And here we go, 91st minute, and this had a couple of people squeaking in the studio, let me tell you as well. Theo, what happens here?
I mean, look, again, it's another factor that they've got to deal with. Mateta's completely the polar opposite to Eddie. I think it was going wide anyway, but it was more the problems he was causing and now putting the defenders in a different situation that they've not been used to. Because it was a game that was comfortable for both teams, but look, very nervy, I felt. And that, if you go into next week particularly, it plays on players' minds, it really does, with certain moments in games. And look, for someone like Mateta, you get the likes of some of the PSG players that can cause a lot more damage than Mateta. No disrespect to him, but look, he's very different stature. But you know, be watching that very closely and know, you know, the weaknesses of Arsenal.
So they were the crucial moments towards the end of the game, but let's wind it all the way back to the start, and Arsenal relying on a good old set piece.
Yeah, and they're absolutely brilliant at them. And if you just look at this, we couldn't show this in all of it because of the time constraints at half time. But I just wanted to look at there. It is Kiwior. There's the goal scorer with the taker, Odegaard. So you can see everybody's set. So he's gone right over. He knows what the plan is. He's basically telling them, you know, something that we've worked on. I know exactly what I want to do. Look, so just keep an eye on them too. And then just watch the knock-on effect. So look at Kiwior running inside now. So if you just look here now, you've got sort of, I think it's Timber here. So as soon as Kiwior gives him a message about what he wants him to do, Timber completely changes his position. So initially he's saying, OK, I'm behind the ball. So Kiwior comes over. Lewis Skelly goes slightly deeper. He now comes and has a word with Timber. Right, we're all going the back post. And then everybody... sorry, just let me
Let's get in the queue for the bus.
Yeah, so even these people who are actually in those positions, as soon as Kiwior comes over, gives the message to Timber, then looks at Trossard as well, and now everybody goes to the back post because there's a plan in place, and then that's what we highlighted at half-time. That, you know, I think there's only Kiwior really who's looking to score. I think the rest of them have all got a job to block the opposition.
Stop it there, Jamie, sorry. Just stop it there. If you flip that to the Crystal Palace perspective, because if you just wind it back a bit, there, you're defending your line as a diligent Crystal Palace defender, and then suddenly you've got no one to actually mark. How unusual is that?
Now, this has been going on for a long time, different to this, in that people would already stand there. So I'd be standing here defending a wide free kick. Theo will be there and he'd just stand there. And you're almost fighting. So what I used to do later on in my career, and Van Nistelrooy was the master at it. And he used to do it in general play, actually, Van Nistelrooy a lot. But you'd have to be brave at the last minute. And then at the last minute, you'd have to... I'd almost try and get myself throw him round that side. But this is different, that they're coming at the last minute. They're not stood there, they're just bumping you. Now, I actually think, what would you do? Because no one can stop this little bump if someone actually goes the other way and plays them offside. So, OK, we're all in our line, they're running from this side. Just before the fellas are out to take it, the whole line, you give a little shout, everyone moves 2 yards that way, and then you're trying to maybe catch these offside. Someone's got to try something, because, this is what we're watching this season, set-piece-wise, is absolutely... Listen, it's outstanding, you have to say that for Arsenal, but as we run it in now, again, everyone, the backsides are out, here we go, the okey-cokey, and it just creates that space. But if you think you've got 4 or 5 players in the box, and most of them aren't looking to get the ball, there's only 1 or 2 looking to get the ball, that delivery has got to be unbelievable, and it is from Odegaard. We've just criticised him before, but this delivery is fantastic. And still the header is out of this world as well. It's 12 yards out, it's on the penalty spot.
And as a centre-back, how much confidence will that give Kiwior getting a goal?
Yeah, it will. Listen, you know what, I think Gabriel scored a goal like this at Anfield a year or 2 ago, something pretty similar in that type of position. But on this one especially, Thomas Partey is big part of Kiwior there. Kiwior gives the whack to Nketiah and stop. And then what you've got is that. That is just being created exactly for him to run into that space. The rest of them have been blocked. They've created that space for Kiwior, who looks a different player than what he did last season when he was playing left-back, looked completely out of his depth. But now he looks, a credible Arsenal centre-back. It's not Gabriel, but it'll certainly give them confidence going into sort of the semi-finals.
Is he a player that's risen to the challenge, Theo?
It shows the mentality and the strength in his character, because, like you just said there, he's been pushed out full-back and he's not gifted with pace. He really isn't. This man's quite quick. You're quicker than himself as a full-back, but...
You talking about me?
Yeah, I am talking about yourself. Yeah.
We're going to have a race here.
But just to be on the sidelines and to not play at all, to wait for your moment, and then to play in such a big opportunity, a big game, knowing that you're not playing for a lot of time. We've obviously spoken about Raheem Sterling not up to game fitness, and you can clearly see that. And that's not the Sterling we know. But Kiwior as well there, it just shows the strength and the homework that Mikel Arteta is to bring in a player like this, understanding that you ain't going to be a starter, but when I need you, I need you. And as well, that confidence goals, obviously it always happens, but look, he's going to have a busy week ahead.
Certainly is, but he looks in a good place right now, doesn't he? It was an equaliser from a set-piece from Crystal Palace. And do you think this one, Theo, is sort of conjured because they know they have the quality of Eze on the edge of the box?
Yeah, look, I said this.
They were back in a situation like this to get a shot away. Yeah,
what it was is obviously Raheem and Trossard were pinned back to create all that space for Eze, but for me, you cannot give any opportunity, any Premier League player, that much time on the edge of the box. And I know it's not often you see goals go in like this, but my position as a winger, I would always be on that edge of the box, knowing that I'm not going to win headers, I'm not going to challenge someone. Put me in a position where I can be in a strength going that way as well. If you lose the ball, I will counter. And to have players nowhere near Eze, and again, it's one of those, you mishit it, but it ended up being obviously perfection as well. But look, never give any Premier League player time and space on the edge of the box. Like I say, even goals like that we want to see more of. But look, fantastic finish from Eze tonight it was.
Yet again, though, yes, they are strong offensively at set pieces, but they're also conceding goals from set pieces as well. I think we've got a graphic to show you. Not at this stage. We'll move on. The graphic isn't there.
Yeah, but I think we know the numbers. We'll get to the graphic, but I think Arsenal now conceded 6 goals from corners. That, would you believe, is the most in the top half of the Premier League. And I just don't know if... Oh, yeah, here we go. We get there. That's goals conceded from corners, and that is the percentage this season. So obviously, you look at Wolves and Southampton have possibly conceded more than Arsenal, but they don't concede as many. They have to defend more corners than Arsenal. So in terms of a percentage, there's only Manchester United who are actually worse than Arsenal this season, set-piece-wise. So when we make a big deal about the set-piece coach, he's absolutely out of this world in terms of going forward. But they've got a big problem. defensively, so should we be cutting his wages in half? Or, I mean, do they need a defensive set-piece coach?
Maybe that's the way it goes, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, a couple of guys bouncing up and down on the sideline.
No, but I feel like it's been one of the stories of the season, and rightly so. I mean, even tonight, the delivery, Kiwior talking to players, people blocking people, getting the delivery right in the right position, the header, it's unbelievable. You feel like every game you go into, Arsenal are going to score a goal on a set piece, or they come very close to score it. And of course, he's had a huge impact, but it is funny, isn't it, that on the flip side of that, they're having huge problems themselves.
Theo, Trossard gave Arsenal the lead before half-time. How important is it his ability that he can play off either foot, he can shoot with either foot when he's playing in this more central position?
Do you know what? It's a player as well who's gifted anywhere in that front line. He's always comfortable with his back against, the play. His first touch is absolutely outstanding to kill the pass with that much pace. But as well, because he keeps people guessing on when he plays on the left-hand side, you're never quite sure if he's going to go on the inside or the outside. He gets his luck, obviously from the deflection. But he's a player that's been so important and probably an underrated player in some sense. When I say underrated, I think he's had moments where he may not be in the game, but he will get that goal. And I think that's when you have players like that in the dressing room or in that team, that in a slip of a moment they can just create something out of nothing. He's certainly got that at Arsenal, because there's not many of them that can create, finishes like that easily as well with both foot. And so for me, yeah, he's important. It's going to be interesting to see where he plays as well. I'm still trying to figure that out myself if he's going to drop Marino. Obviously,
were you convinced if that was the audition? Were you convinced by it?
I mean, he gets the goal, yeah. I mean, it's one of those, you put yourself in that position to get a goal. He's done his job. I think there was elements in the second half, it did start to die off, and it was one of those where as soon as Crystal Palace got that goal, everyone woke up a bit. And but yeah, I think he's put a little bit of pressure on that side of it. But look, he lives with that.
I think the fact that at home in the first leg makes it easier to go with sort of Trossard at the top end of the pitch, Marino a little bit further back. I think it's been a lot tougher if it was away from home in the first leg. Obviously, Partey be back for the second leg. I think that would have been a much more interesting conundrum. But again, it's another situation where Arsenal without a player, an important player in Partey. You think of Gabriel, obviously Havertz, Jesus as well. And I think if Arsenal had the full repertoire of players, I think they have a really strong chance of going on and winning the Champions League. It's just going to obviously be a lot tougher missing players.
Yeah, I'm sure that enthusiasm and excitement will be back next week for, as he says, the biggest game of the season so far. But do you think, Theo, there is, as well as the frustration and disappointment, there is anger there as well from Mikel Arteta about how his side have failed to have that consistency that they really needed to push Liverpool?
You could clearly see that, couldn't you? I mean, it's all I know. I don't think Mikel's not the type to get distracted by other games at all, but it was completely out of character. They spoke about performance. It was the patterns of play, everything wasn't there. It was too safe, too many mistakes. And
have we seen this too many times now? It's
no,
13 draws.
And this is what I'm saying about going into another game in bad habits, and he needs to get those bad habits out of the system, because like Jamie was saying, there's been too many draws, there's been too many mistakes by certain players which you wouldn't expect in difficult situations. And the fixtures, you can see there the results. Look, it's been a bit indifferent, but that's what I'm talking about, the draws, and particularly the teams you're playing against as well, who you'd expect Arsenal to get points from. But this is going to have to change next year if they're going to want to win titles. You talk about, Jamie, you spoke about the point system, how many points to win the league. Nowhere near at the moment if they want to win the league, right, with points.
And do these drop points that we've seen consistently over these challenging few weeks and months, does that all play into this concern that for us, they still are going to have a bit of a headache before this season is out? Yes, they've got the Champions League games that will almost take care of themselves. There's still work to be done.
I think he'd be furious tonight, Mikel Arteta, because they'd be fine in terms of qualifying for the Champions League. The point being is you want to put that to bed as early as you can. Now, when you look at the fixtures, I think they've got Bournemouth, which is not an easy game at home, but that's in between the two biggest games of the season. Now, if you win tonight, you can almost write the Bournemouth game off and you change the whole team. I don't think he's in a position to do that, because what comes next, Liverpool away. So if you put a really weakened team out against Bournemouth, which I think he would have wanted to do, to really go for this Champions League final, and you lose the game, and then you go to Anfield, and there's a good chance you're probably going to lose at Liverpool on the back of playing PSG. Liverpool are at home with a free week. If you lose the next two games, the others are a point or two behind you. And then you go on, I mean, you've got Newcastle.
And then Newcastle becomes a crunch game, doesn't it?
Exactly. So that's why I think he'd be furious. And that's why I think he went with his team as strong as he did at Ipswich. It's like, put this to bed now, and then we can concentrate on the 2 Paris Saint-Germain games, and we'll be fine. And they'll qualify for the Champions League next year, of course they will. But you just don't want that sort of thing. You know, you're looking behind, you're looking over your shoulder. I mean, I've just looked at the stats then. You can't believe when you look at obviously the 6 points ahead of City. City have had an awful season by their standards. They've won the same amount of games in the Premier League. They've both won 18. You can't believe that. And that's when you just look at the numbers of the other teams there.
Do you think that's a realistic concern, given the evidence that the case that Jamie just made, that 1 or 2 of those could actually catch Arsenal? There's a possibility they could go past Arsenal.
Well, we're talking about Manchester City, who've been dominating the Premier League for many, many years and had a poor season, who could then end up ahead of Arsenal, which everyone expected whoever finished above City would win the league. And yeah, I think that's the disappointing things, because there's been certain situations in this season where, you know, there's been discipline issues, there's been, you know, referees' decisions, or whatever you want to see it, injuries as well plays its part. But it just shows there for me that certain players, obviously going back to Odegaard, starting to feel a bit comfortable and not being pushed a bit more. And there's a sense of that in some performances. What about the goalkeeper
tonight? Would that be a concern?
Well, the goalkeeper tonight, yeah, it was, again, a bit of indifferent, but I can't, you know, Raya's been absolutely fantastic for many times, because a period of times when he won't be on the ball at all, but he's always been very consistent. Tonight it was a few wobbles, but look, it's one of those, I think he's the type of character that would really put this to bed. I think as a goalkeeper you have to. If you make decisions like a poor error, you just need to forget about it, because otherwise you won't be able to play at the top level, and particularly for Arsenal Football Club. So for me, Raya, I'm not as bothered about. I'm just talking about other players in certain positions that will be too comfortable and need to be pushed.
I think just looking at that, I still think Mikel Arteta's got to be really brave in the Bournemouth game, and I think he does have to change the majority of the players, because Arsenal in the Champions League semi-final, a chance to win the champions, you've got to go for it.
Reality is, I'm not sure he can.
I know.
He had 4 players on the bench tonight. Never started a Premier League game.
The point I'm trying to make is, sometimes as a manager, you have to make a brave decision, and the likelihood is they'd still qualify for the Champions League. But as I said, he won't want it. It'll be in the back of his mind, or what do we do in the Bournemouth game? But you're that close to creating history for Arsenal. Never won the Champions League before. He has to go for it against PSG. And if he has to rest players in the middle, he has to do that and then back himself in the next sort of 3 or 4 games to get the job done in terms of finishing in the top 5.
They've got class though, Jamie, haven't they? Have we seen a big step forward from Crystal Palace this season under Oliver Glasner?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's about managers coming in middle of the season, playing that type of system. We know that was, you know, something, you know, the Manchester United manager, the Wolves manager have come in. He made a huge impact last season. They had a really tough start to the season. But as I said, that middle period of the season, they were as good as anybody in the Premier League. And understandably so, they've dropped off a little bit on the back of, you know, the result they got at Fulham in the FA Cup. But it's a huge moment for them at the weekend. Aston Villa will be favourites. But I don't think there'll be too much in the game. And if you can go to the Emirates and get a 2-2 draw, maybe almost win it at the end, that'll give them big confidence going into that game.
You agree, Theo? Have they got the quality to hurt a team like Aston Villa, who we've seen have put on some big performances in recent weeks?
Do you know, it's a space where the players may not have been in this position before, because at this stage of the season with certain clubs, certain players would switch off, knowing about the summer and looking after themselves, but because they need to stay focused and they want to be in that starting lineup on the semi-final and even make history and be in the final, these players will be in a different mindset that they have ever been in before. They've never been in this position. They've, you know, obviously they have reached back in 2016 the final, of course, but I just think there's a different sense of this arrogance in a good way. These players, and there's this togetherness. And for me, it's really important. I know from myself, when I had a long injury and I was out for a period of time, and with the FA Cup final, and I hadn't played that much, but I got myself into the team just off one performance. And it's the same thing for these players as well. One performance can change anything. Like say, Mateta, of course, was going to start. Eddie comes off. We saw, and he'd be really disappointed with that. Of course he will. But look, it's all about, you know, performance and doing the right thing at the right time at the season for the managers asking of you.
But there's going to be a little cluster of teams that hope Palace don't do well this weekend as well, led by Bournemouth, because if Palace don't make it, then 8th place could be Conference League next season. And that could have an impact on the last few games of the season as well, in terms of what teams have got to play for.